Hello, this is Dr. Stephen Greer with the World Puja Network, and this is Conversations with Dr. Greer. I'm very excited to be joined today by Charlie Balog, who's a musician and audio expert who does a lot of work for the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, cseti.org, in analyzing tones and sounds and anomalous events that have happened. And he's been involved with our research group in the Phoenix area since for a number of years, and has been on a number of the CSETI expeditions as well for week-long periods, and has had some really astonishing experiences quite on his own as he began to get involved with the transdimensional conscious aspects of interstellar contact. And it's really exciting to have Charlie with us today so he can go through with us some of the really amazing tones and sounds that have emerged from transdimensional space-time around us, and she will actually set up to play those for you so that you guys at the World Puja Network listening can hear it, and it'll be heard worldwide, and you'll be able to then hear an explanation of what led up to these amazing tones being heard by our contact group. For those of you who are new to this, I just want to introduce the concept, and that is that back in 1990, about 20 years ago, I founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which is a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, that's dedicated to studying the fact that we are being visited by advanced interstellar civilizations, but more importantly, to engage in what we call close encounters of the fifth kind. And a close encounter of the fifth kind is distinguished from the other types of contact events in that we are inviting contact through an organized contact team endeavor, a diplomatic effort, and it's based on a number of protocols, the primal one, the most important one, being the consciousness and the aspect of, as all of you at the World Puja Network will understand, that mind is a non-local, omnipresent field, and that as humans go into a state of quiet awareness, not only can you learn to remote view distant places, but that with extraterrestrial civilizations, their communication systems, which are scalar in nature and which can pick up on directed, coherent thought, you are enabled to contact them and then show them where you're located. So we use awareness and remote viewing and vectoring, as we call it, coherent thought sequencing, through consciousness to make contact. And then it's augmented by the use of lasers as well as tones. And this latter, the tonality, is very important. And as all of you who have studied the Vedas and the Pujas understand, tone precedes light and light precedes form. And the inner tonality of reality is really the first emergence from the unbounded absolute field of pure consciousness as it goes into manifest being. So this is why mantras and sounds and singing and tones and music are so important to culture, not just on Earth, but throughout the cosmos. And I think that understanding that technologically there is a component of contact that is tonal is really critically important. And this goes back thousands of years, and we're not going to go into all of that, but in terms of modern history, it's very, very important for people to understand that, and to understand that this is sort of the triad of the contact protocols that CSETI is using involves consciousness, light, and tonality. And the tones that we use, we used to just have the tones from Colin Andrews from the crop circles that were recorded by the BBC and by Colin Andrews' team when this amazing tone appeared omnidirectionally around them, and they got a brief recording of it. And we've been projecting that out into space using radio transceivers and what have you. Now we have a number of other tones, as well as segments of ET voices that have appeared, and much of this has been ramping up in the last 2 years, quite remarkably in the last couple of years. So we want to share a lot of this with you, and that's going to be the real focus of this particular interview, because we have this wonderful expert on sound and tone and audio engineering, Charlie Balog, with us. So thank you, Charlie, for joining us.
Well, it's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time now, so I'm really excited about doing this.
So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about, how you got involved with this and the kind of experience you had in consciousness involving that gave rise to the CSETI kind of tonality, one of the tones in the music that you heard during this contact event, and to sort of set the stage for your own involvement.
Well, I first joined CSETI about 1990, and I was or 1991, I should say, and it was as a result of hearing one of your lectures here in Phoenix. I went to my first training in Joshua Tree in 2001, and part of the CSETI contact protocols involves going into meditation. And of course, we use meditation quite extensively throughout that process, not only during the actual contact sessions, but all through the entire training processes, which also include morning meditations as well. During one of these first morning meditation sessions that I had, then this was only the second day of the training, I went into what felt like a lucid dream, only I knew I wasn't dreaming. I was sitting there in my hotel room and just going into meditation, but it was in an immediate effect where I found myself outside in what I felt like was like a field or something like that. And I looked up and I saw the CSETI logo. Now, those of you who are familiar with the CSETI website, we have an artist representation of what I actually saw during that lucid dream or vision or whatever you want to call it. And that'll help in this discussion if you are finding it hard to follow what it is that I'm talking about.
Right, you can go to cseti.org and see that right now as you're listening if you're at a computer. Yeah. That's
right, yeah. Well, what I saw was a three-dimensional version of that logo. And as those of you familiar with it, there are three globes or circles or spheres in an equilateral triangle, which are connected by lines or bars. What I saw in that vision was a three-dimensional representation of that. And each one of the globes had a sort of a translucent appearance. Within the globes were specific lights and shapes and forms. The logo it was rotating in a counterclockwise position, and it was huge in my vision. I could guesstimate that it was 150 to 250 feet across. Each one of the globes, in addition to having specific light and structure inside, also had a specific sound, which intrigued me and really surprised me. And it was very lucid. I could hear and see everything that was going on. The first globe had what looked like soft pulsing lights in it. And the music or the sound that I heard mimicked that or gave sort of a sonic representation of that. The second globe had what looked like a crystalline structure in it, very much like a lattice work, only of a very intricate clear crystal with sparkling lights, intensely sparkling lights, and the music again reflected that. The third globe had also crystalline structure in it, but it had movement inside, almost as if there were tiny gears that were rotating around each other. And once again, that sound was in motion, not only within the globe itself, but as the logo rotated, you could hear the sounds. I could hear the sounds passing in front of me, and each one of the connecting rods or lines had a specific sound as well, as though it were some sort of a power transference. That's the only way I can describe it. I'd like to play a little bit of that for you now.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So here it is.
Need to be a little louder.
Okay. This is the first globe. This is the second globe. And this is the third globe. And that's essentially what I heard. Now, what was amazing was, as a musician, I was fascinated by what I was hearing, and people who have heard this music asked me if I composed it, and that's not the case. It literally was a transcription of what I heard.
Right.
Yeah, and it was frustrating at the time because I didn't have a keyboard in front of me to try and work out the ideas that I heard. So I had to take notes after the meditation. I came home after the training and then tried to recreate what it was that I heard.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And luckily, of course, one thing we found is that the extraterrestrial civilizations will have contact with people in certain ways where they have a certain capacity. In this case, obviously, since you're a musician and you know about audio and know how to compose and create sound, this was an aspect of their contact given to you that probably only you and a few other people would have been. If it had happened to me, I might have, and I've had experiences like this where I've had the most beautiful tones and music, but I would never be able to reproduce them because I don't know anything about music. And so that's why this is so wonderful. And that's how we have found that this is why it's important to have a team of people from diverse backgrounds as well, is that we find that the ETs will, in a sense, utilize the skills and the gifts that each person has and that each person brings to the process.
Well, what was amazing to me, too, is that, most people think, well, what would extraterrestrial music sound like? And I was quite surprised to find it very tonal and not all that much different than what we're used to listening to, although I don't know if that was specifically geared for me or not with my experience and what we're used to listening to. So it may have been tailor-made for me as opposed to be just sort of a generic sound. Now, what's interesting about that is that on several trainings now, we've been playing this music out in the field within the circle using, a small boom box or something. A few years back, in Joshua Tree. We were on a break, and the music was playing on the boombox, and I decided to take a walk out into the desert just to get away from the crowd for a minute and experience things on my own. And I walked out about, I would say, 150, 200 yards out into the desert, far enough away that I couldn't hear the music from the group anymore. But I then heard this same music coming from the open desert in the opposite direction.
Right.
And it was just unbelievably unique and surprising at the same time. I stood there and I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I said out loud, "I hope you enjoyed the music that I wrote for you." And it continued. And it wasn't shortly after that, I literally ran across back to the circle, another 100 yards on the opposite side where you were, and I brought you all back. And I think there was a few other people that we brought with us at the time.
Right. No, it was amazing. And this is exactly the kind of contact that happens that's very exciting and very interactive. And in the midst of this, of course, there are other types of phenomena going on, whether there's an orb or a craft that flies over, all kinds of other things. One thing I want to mention, and going back to the beginning, as it were, I wanted you to be able to share that story, and it's very important because the CSETI logo, which is 3 circles connected by lines, of course you saw them three-dimensional as spheres, which is how they'd be in 3D.
Right.
That originated, if you go, and a lot of these stories are in the new book that's come out called Contact Countdown to Transformation, that has a DVD with it, and on that DVD is an aerial shot. We rented an airplane and went above this crop circle and actually filmed it, and it's a crop circle in England that appeared after Colin Andrews and I and a group of people went up on Woodborough Hill, and we all were given this vision of this form. And it was like it was given to us because we all agreed upon that form. And so we actually went into meditation, contacted the extraterrestrial civilizations, and asked them to make a crop circle. Mentally, we were doing this, visualizing it in that form. And the next morning, that crop circle form, which looks like this, which has become the CSETI logo, was found in a field very close to where we were by a farmer in the wee hours of the morning at dawn, at like 5 in the morning or something, because you're so far north, the sun comes up very early in July, late July. And what was interesting about that is that it was, in a sense, a CE5 crop circle. And it was after this happened that Colin Andrews came forward and said, yes, in fact, even from the early days, from 1989, 1991, when we were getting involved with all this, he and Busty Taylor were flying over and looking at that time, they were these just simple circles that were appearing very near to where Colin Andrews lived. And at one point, he turned to Busty Taylor, and they were flying over this field. And they said to each other, wouldn't it be amazing if a circle appeared that combined all the different forms of circles that we've seen, a circle with a ring and with a Celtic cross and this and that, and the very next morning in exactly the spot when they said that to each other over that field, when they were flying over that point of that field, exactly that crop circle that combined all the elements appeared. So there is a interactivity of this that is transdimensional, that is mediated in consciousness and thought, which is really mind-blowing and has been dispositively proven to be possible. And this is where you then have to say, well, how is that happening? And one of the things I point out to people is that when you start dealing with these transdimensional technologies that permit travel faster than the speed of light and communication faster than the speed of light, you're dealing with technologies that cross into what I call over the crossing point of light and the speed of light. And when you get into that dimension, you're dealing with the realm of thought visualization, the astral realm, the realm of consciousness, and all of that. And this is why the science of consciousness, and certainly everyone at the World Fusion Network understand this, the science of consciousness is the central science of the next 1,000 years. Of course, we need to get out the new energy technologies and all the things that have been suppressed for 100 years, but really that will be the big breakthroughs that happen in understanding how this is. And it's not just it is a science, and there is a methodology to it, not only for meditation, but also for contact and for manifestation. And that's what we're finding with these CSETI expeditions, and it just keeps accelerating. And one thing that Colin had happen, I mentioned this a moment ago, is one of the original tones that we used in our contact protocols were these tones that were recorded in a crop circle field where there was levitation and anti-gravity and all kinds of weird stuff happening, and it's an amazing story that Colin Andrews shares. And they did get a recording of this tone, and then we have it, and Charlie's been able to, really clean it up and what have you. So I don't know, Charlie, if you could play that so people can hear.
Sure.
This, by the way, when you get this DVD that comes with the book, Contact, Countdown to Transformation, and you can get that at disclosureproject.org, is on there so that you can play this. And there's also a CD version of it, so if you want to go out into the wilderness somewhere and play these tones while you're doing the visualization and meditation, it's a very, very powerful one because this is from them. People say, why do we, radio transmit these out there? I said, well, this wasn't created by man. This was technological, and it's a tone, but it came from the ETs, so very important. So if you play that one now, Charlie.
Sure.
Maybe a bit louder.
One thing we should note about that is that the sounds that you're hearing are actually synthesized sounds. The original recording was done through a video recorder, a high-end video camera, and while Colin and his associates were walking through the crop circle, the energy of the crop circle literally fried all the gear, the video equipment, any audio equipment they had, and this sound was the only thing that survived the experience. Not only was it unique, it was also had a directionality to it because it came. It sounded like it came through one end of the circle and went out through the other, and that's why you hear the sounds fading in and out. The original recording had a lot of noise and static and everything on it. When I listened to it originally, I thought there was something very recognizable about it because the sound is actually the purest waveform there is, which is called a sine wave. And I was able to recreate it almost exactly as it was in the original recording. And I thought that was the salient part of the recording and not necessarily the context in which it took place.
Well, and of course, you know, this is very significant that this has come from elsewhere, and that there was a recording, but and that whatever energy was in that field was so powerful that it did. I mean, there were these, you know, $75,000 BBC Betacams and equipment that completely, you know, had all kinds of circuits that got kind of fried from all this. And what I find interesting about these tones is that when we've had a lot of anomalous things happen with these tones. For example, when I first had the idea to take them and not just play them with an audio boombox or something, but also to take a radio and transmit them. The first time we did that, we were, believe it or not, on Marconi's Hill in England, where the first telegraph was sent in the 1800s. And we were up on this hill, and I had a transceiver, a radio transmitter and receiver, and I was transmitting these tones. And suddenly, after we finished, all around us in an omnidirectional way, a very similar sine wave tone came into space around us, and it had begun to rain and was windy, and all of us could hear this doo 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 doo, and it went around and around and around, and it was them answering us. And at other times we've done this where we've had the button pressed to send out the tone, and the ETs have overridden the circuit so that while we're transmitting, the tones or some variant of the tone comes back through the radio. Now, technically, anyone who knows anything about these radio receivers and transceivers know that when you're transmitting, you can't receive. You can either receive or transmit. In this case, we'll be transmitting. They'll override the transmission and come through. We've also had it happen where we've had the radios off, and they will start sending these tones through them even when they're turned off. Very, very strange electromagnetic, transdimensional electronics. And this is the sort of things, and this has happened dozens and dozens of times, and we've had people on our contact groups that are around the world who are using these tones in the meditation who have had all kinds of variants of the same kinds of strange experiences with these tones. So, by the way, there is a training kit at disclosureproject.org that you can get that has the CDs with all these different tones on them and the meditation instruction and all of that that's on that site. And I think that what people are finding is that the tonality can come, and it is often directional, but often omnidirectional. In other words, it'll seem to appear in just space around you with nothing that you can see that's originating it, and then it spreads out in sort of an omnidirectional way. And this is exactly what happened at Mount Shasta a few years ago. We were up in the National Forest on the slopes. I guess we were up at about 5,000 feet at Mount Shasta in what we call our secluded site. And we were there, and I was doing the guided meditation where we go into deep meditation, and then we go in expansion of awareness and go into space and make contact, and then we do this sort of prayer and meditation for the healing of the earth and for universal peace. And during that process, just at a moment when I paused, because I felt something coming, everyone in the circle heard this tone that then they could see in their mind. Now, Linda Willits had a tape recorder on that was just an old-fashioned, wasn't digital, one of those tape recorders, with a tape. And she got just a little bit of it, and it's really a faint hint of what we actually experienced, because what we actually experienced was something coming from within space-time that emerged, and the tonality of it was so pure and so amazing that everyone saw in their mental imaging, it overrode anything that you were thinking about, where you saw these spheres, very similar to the spheres that Charlie just explained with his experience some years ago. But in this case, they became like a string of spheres as the tone moved, almost like a string of pearls that were these perfect spheres, sort of a pearly, grayish white color that was formed by the tone, and this is very Vedic. Again, people with the World Fusion Network understand the concept in the Vedas of name and form, where the sound tonality within thought can manifest and materialize an object. In this case, it was an extraterrestrial vehicle that was there represented in its tonality, but then visually in people's minds we could see the form of it as it floated through the circle. And I don't know if you can play that Shasta tone.
Yeah.
It's again. This is a very faint, a little teeny clip of it, and I hate to say this, but sort of just an indication of what happened. But the experience of it was so rich and so multidimensional and transdimensional when it happened. But with the quality of the electronic recording device that we had at the time, this is as much as we got.
Yeah, and what I've done here is isolate it, and I looped it several times, and also reduced it in pitch so you could hear that it had an actual tonal aspect to it. So here it is. Now, this is also, there's an interesting story that goes along with this, because I first heard about it through Linda and Trudy Geiker, one of our other longtime members, outside of the training, because I wasn't actually there. When they described to me that image of pearls in a straight line, it reminded me of the harmonic structure of music, where you have a fundamental tone and upper harmonics that rise up from that point, variations on that same sound. It's a very important aspect of all of this is the harmonic structure of those sounds as well. Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. And again, this is one of the things we're working on right now that Charlie's helping us with is to figure out how to have really better quality digital omnidirectional recording on site, so that we get a better quality recording of these sorts of events, because they've escalated from a number of, now this has happened, I don't know, dozens of times, and as you can imagine, with just inexpensive equipment, people holding them in their laps and what have you, we haven't gotten as many of them as we would like. What we're going to do now is that we're going to begin to have a specialized recording, a binaural or whatever it's called, a recording system hooked to a digital recording device, so that when these events happen, hopefully we'll get a better quality. Someday, if we had the funding, we would like to have half a dozen of these scattered out in the field around us, because often we'll find that it'll be very specific, where even though it's quite loud, people only in one area of space hear it and other people don't. Because it's very anomalous. It's transdimensional. It's not coming from a linear source. It's coming from a transdimensional source from other dimensions, as these ET craft are in the area. And prior to their materializing, or when they're dematerialized, they can emit or communicate with us with this kind of tonality. So I think that's what's really exciting about essentially what the binaural recording is a set of mics that are positioned like human ears on a mount of some sort. And what they do is hear sound in 3 dimensions, not only left to right like stereo, but also as the human ears would hear it, above and below and behind, so that when we use these microphones, we'll be able to tell which direction it's coming from, whether it's in motion, which has often happened during the trainings. And so I'm excited about doing that sort of thing.
And one of the other things that have happened is recently, just I think a little less than 2 months ago in September, we were up on Mount Shasta again, and we were up at this place up way high on the mountain at an area called Sand Flats. It's this big flat plain up about 7,000 feet, I believe, or nearly 7,000 feet, and right in front of where Dr. Bravo and I were sitting, there was the most beautiful emission in just clear air of a sort of musical chimes that appeared. Now, I don't know, Charlie, if you have been able to isolate any of that.
Yeah, I did.
But when we heard it, it was almost like, I hate to say it, almost sounded like angelic music. It was otherworldly music, and it was just a few notes of it, and it appeared, I mean, no more than 3 or 4 feet in front of ourselves in the center of the circle. And there, too, no one had a recording device that was very good. Linda was holding one in her hand, and at the time there were some people talking or doing something, or rattling something. So it was sort of overwhelmed with other ambient noise. But it was so pure, it was like crystalline. It was this pure, crystalline, multiple notes that were just beautiful. And this was around the time that we had some astonishing sightings that we did get filmed on videotape of craft that had come right over and materialized over the group and flown over. So it's all part of the contact events that are happening at these expeditions. So if you want to share that, I think that'd be great if you can.
And also, same thing here. I've isolated it, looped it, and changed pitch a couple of times so you can hear it from those aspects as well. It almost has a sort of a whistle quality to it.
Yes, well, that was it actually didn't. I mean, when you were there, I was there, and I was only 3 feet from it, and it was absolutely a series of completely pure, crystalline notes. And they were so beautiful that you felt beauty when you heard it. It was truly beautiful. And one of the reasons why I point this out, and I'm so glad we did get some of this recorded, is that the effect in awareness is also very profound, because when you heard it in real time, it actually had an effect, and it was loud enough that people on the opposite side of the circle, and we had like 35 or 40 people there, heard it. And now some people didn't hear it, and that may be because they had hats on and had their ears covered up, or just don't have very acute hearing. But it was heard from quite some distance away, and it had an effect on the awareness because it was such a pure tonality that emerged around us. And often this happens when there's an extraterrestrial being nearby as well as a craft. And, of course, we heard last year when we were at Joshua Tree National Park, we had a sphere that materialized out in the desert beside us as we were taking a break, and as I walked back, it followed us back. And when we got back to the circle of the whole group, we heard a group of ET voices, and I have these very, very sophisticated night scope binoculars, and I looked over in the area where we heard these voices. It was 3 or 4 male and female voices speaking. You couldn't see anything, and these were with like 4th generation night scopes. But you could hear exactly where they were gathered. And it was there that a little while later, just a couple minutes later, this sphere reappeared and created this cone of light with this ET hovering in it just outside the seats. And this is at cseti.org. There's a picture of this ET being that we later learned came from the Andromeda Galaxy. And it's very, very clear, but he's transdimensionally. It's sort of like an astral electronic projection. If you can visualize your astral body that you fly around in a lucid dream, at that level of energy being able to be electronically transmitted into a site during a contact event. Now, unfortunately, at that time we did not have anyone recording, so we could have gotten, this brief few seconds of these voices speaking, but it was heard by a large number of people at the same time. And this is one of the reasons why I tell people when we go out on these expeditions, even if you don't see everything going on, there's contact happening almost continuously, because we set up these protocols to invite these interstellar civilizations to meet with us for interplanetary peace and for universal peace. It's become this worldwide effort where now there are thousands of people doing this all over the world, literally in virtually every country. And it's creating its own power, as it were, as in consciousness as people do this. But when we're out doing these expeditions with 30 or 40 people or whatever, it has a power because there's a group of humans who are reaching out to these visitors saying, we want to make contact with you peacefully. We want to open contact. And we're doing this in the context of universal consciousness as the real central communicating philosophy of interspecies contact between worlds, and that we're doing this for universal peace to benefit all peoples, not just on Earth but other worlds. And that's the spirit that they want to see people advancing into this contact work with, because, up until now, the only contact they've had have been people in a state of bewilderment or denial, or being chased by jet fighters or electronic weapon systems or electromagnetic weapons or what have you. There has not been an organized global outreach like this. And I'm convinced that when we started this 20 years ago, we immediately started having these sorts of events and contact happening, not because we're important, but the concepts, the ideas are important. And there aren't any organized governments doing it, and the United Nations isn't doing it. And to the extent that there is a group that knows about this, that are in sort of secret projects, they have a very militarized approach to the presence of these extraterrestrial civilizations, which is, of course, harmful rather than helpful. And I think that that's why they're very eager, so that if wherever you are, I know there's people worldwide listening to this interview, if you learn these techniques in meditation with the mantra, remote viewing, using these tones, and then, of course, we have lasers that we send up to also send up a vector that I'll often send them up in rhythm with these tones, by the way, that what will happen is that if you do it within this philosophy, if I can use that concept, of peaceful contact for the benefit, mutual benefit of all concerned, they will respond. Now, they may not respond the way you expect, and this is where I tell people there are literally a million different ways that we've had these extraterrestrial civilizations respond, and it runs the gamut from the sort of experience that Charlie had, which was this amazing, almost like a hypnagogic dream, remote view consciousness experience, transdimensional, to fully materialized craft that we've videotaped and photographed, to tones that have come inside the circle, to sitting in meditation out in the desert and having people touched, to having actual extraterrestrial beings fully materialized, which they have done, where people will look and they'll see a group of 3 or 4 of them standing outside the circle, fully standing there, and these sort of things. So it runs the gamut. The main point, though, is not the phenomenon per se, but the fact that they're responding because of how we're approaching the issue. And the approach is one that is rooted in the Vedic knowledge of the universality of mind, that the conscious mind whereby every single sentient being in the universe is awake is one. There's a singularity of the light of awareness, and then everything emanates from there. And if you understand that, they certainly understand it, because you can't travel faster than the speed of light without understanding transdimensionality and the primacy of consciousness and mind. And these civilizations that are, some of them literally are millions of years more developed than human civilization is on Earth today, certainly understand all the Vedas and the Siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-I-S, the development of different powers and gifts that are described in the Vedas. These civilizations understand that and have it at a level where it's been developed even technologically, whether it's levitation, dematerialization, bilocation, trilocation, remote viewing, precognition, looking into the future, looking into the past, traveling faster than the speed of light. All of these things, and this is one of the reasons why the whole paradigm of contact has to get out of the linear mindset of radio signals and this sort of thing, to an understanding of what kind of civilization and what kind of contact will we have as a consequence of contact with civilizations that are traveling faster than the speed of light. Because if you are moving beyond light speed, both for communication and for traveling of your spacecraft and your people, you're not doing that in staying in a solid materialized form. You're developed electronics where the craft and everyone on it literally go through a resonant field shift and pop into another dimension and travel in that form. And when we're out in the desert or we're up on the mountain, we're getting ready to go to Joshua Tree National Park again, although that event is sort of fully subscribed right now. But we'll be doing this again. We're planning to have a week in Florida. We hope this winter. You can sign up for our mailing list at cseti.org to find out where these next expeditions will be. We may be doing something again in Southern California this winter. We'll certainly be in Crestone, Colorado in June for a week, and we're going to be doing another week expedition in the crop circles in England this coming summer in July, and we'll be back up at Mount Shasta at the last week of August, and we'll be back at Joshua Tree again in 2011 in November. So we do a number of these a year. Usually we do 4 or 5 of these week-long expeditions, and sometimes some shorter ones. And those are opportunities for the public to come and learn these techniques. But what I want to emphasize is that they're not difficult to learn, and once you understand the principle of consciousness and why transdimensional technologies are interfacing with thought and consciousness, then a lot of this very strange, people would call just sort of a weird phenomena begins to make sense, because you're dealing with civilizations that deal with this type of expression as easily as we talk on a cell phone or turn on a light switch. But this only makes sense that if you really stop and think about it, how are you going to travel amongst star systems and amongst galaxies that at the speed of light you could never get there? You'd be dead before you could get there. It's too far of distance. So when you're dealing with these sort of technologies and civilizations that have mastered them, and you're asking for contact, it can happen in amazing ways, and that's what we're finding, and it's escalating. Now, the other thing that is escalated, and this is particularly in the last 12 months, 11 or 12 months, is that we've had a phenomenon which I'll just say is brief bleed-throughs transdimensionally of ET voices right in the center of the circle or right near us. And this has happened several times. It just happened in England when we were there in England this past summer in July. It happened last November in Orange County when we did a one-day workshop up in near Irvine. And it happened at Joshua Tree, as I mentioned, although at that time it didn't get recorded. But we do have a couple of these, and unfortunately, again, these are very brief recordings. But if you can do those for us, Charlie, a couple of these voices may be interesting for people to hear.
The first one is from the Orange County event. And I have two clips here. The first one is short. It's only about 30 seconds long. It'll give you a context of where this took place and how it took place. We were in the process of, or they were in the process of sharing what had happened during a previous segment of the training. And the voice shows up about halfway through. It's difficult to get an idea of what's going on because it was recorded with a stereo recorder, and it happens very briefly in the left channel. You can hear it in stereo, but you won't hear it in stereo here. So here's the context, and then I'm going immediately afterwards. I'll play the voice itself being looped. So here's the context clip.
Okay.
That's what I mean. What messages, thoughts, images? Okay. So they're scanning. You want to just hear a voice? Yeah. No. It was like a boom. Oh.
Okay, so that's the context clip. Now, if you were paying attention, you heard this very clear, very quick little sound, so almost like someone saying, check. Here's the loop.
I want to say that what we heard, and this is more anomalous, everyone sitting near me, it happened right in front of me and Linda and Jan, Dr. Bravo, we heard at least four distinct syllables. But when we listened to the audio tape, even though you were hearing all the talking and we have radar detectors that started going off as we were having transdimensional contact with these electronic laser and radar detectors, and we're out in the middle of nowhere, by the way, then we heard these four syllables. But when you listen to the tape, there's only like one or two, even though there's no break in the tape. So the transdimensional nature of it, even though our ears heard it, the tape recording only picked up part of what was heard, even though it was recording all the other sounds and people talking. I just want to point out that that in itself is bizarre and sort of anomalous.
This loop segment also is looped to slow down the actual sound that's heard, so you can hear it expanded out a little bit. So.
Right.
And of course, you're hearing on that last clip, you're hearing a little bit of the digital processing that takes place when you slow it down.
Right, yeah, and so what was interesting is that a few days later, we went from Orange County up to Joshua Tree National Park, where we had this picture of this amazing image of the picture of this ET hovering outside the circle. But also during that week, we were one morning, I was upstairs meditating in my room, and I was in this deep meditative state when I was contacted by an ET that said something quite bizarre. He just said, the Joshua trees transmit star energy. Just very matter-of-factly like that. And it was clear as a bell. The Joshua trees transmit star energy. It was absolutely clear. And if you look at Joshua trees, they have these sort of needle-like leaves on them that look like little antennas. They look like clusters of antenna. And the ETs were saying that they absorb and then transmit back out some sort of strange and subtle energy from the stars around the Earth. And now what's interesting is that at the time that happened, underneath where my room was, there was Dr. Bravo and Raven Abolsi and Linda Willits were up having coffee already, and they heard this same voice kind of whisper, because I guess they knew I was meditating upstairs. They were being polite, whisper, and it was a male voice, clearly, amongst them. And they all three heard it. In fact, they turned to each other and said, "Did you hear that? Did you just whisper?" And it was this voice again. So it all started then and then continued on with the contact out in the field with this being that we photographed. And then in England, and we've had it happen numerous times as well since then, but then in England we were sitting, and I believe it was the last night we were out, and we were sitting in this field. In fact, we were sitting exactly at this spot where in 1992 we had about a 100-foot diameter spacecraft fully materialized in the field. And if you get the book, Contact, Countdown to Transformation, that has the DVD of a lot of these images, you'll see that account. Well, we're sitting right there at that same spot at this farm that has 1,800 acres that we're given permission to use every year. We'll be there again this coming July in 2011. We suddenly heard on the outside of the circle, but beside a member of our team who provides security for me and also does a lot of photography, again, a male voice very clearly speak. And I don't know if you have that one as well.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and again, just a little bit of it got recorded, but we all heard it very distinctly, and it was no one in our group. It was outside the circle and just emerging in thin air where there was an extraterrestrial being that was there, but in a dematerialized form.
Right. This clip, you'll hear at the very beginning a bit of the radar detectors going off, then a quiet spot where I eliminated some of the background noise, and then you'll hear one portion of the tape which comes up very quickly, and you'll hear the voice and then some comments afterwards. So.
There's one. I heard a voice or something. Did you? Right here. Yes, right here.
I thought that was Edmonton.
No.
I did too. And you said two. I didn't say anything?
Okay. Now I'll play it again so you can hear it one more time.
Yeah, the voice is amazing.
Right. Whoops. Hold on. There we go.
There's one. I heard a voice or something. Did you? Right up.
It was an interesting sound, certainly.
Did you isolate it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, you mean just the voice itself?
Yes.
No, I did, but I couldn't find a clip for the show, so.
Okay, that's fine. Well, it's interesting because when you listen to it, it almost sounds like au revoir. It almost sounds like goodbye in French. And we had just come from France where we had an expedition. Now, I can't say that's what this was saying. But it's very strange. And again, so much of this is a bit mind-blowing because we're sitting there, and as you heard, the detectors, we have these radar and laser detectors, and they were going off. We're in the middle of this 1,800-acre farm out in the middle of nowhere where there's no source of anything that would make them go off. And then this voice of just standing no more than a foot or two outside our circle makes these just a couple of syllables that, of course, yes, you heard from the conversation. Many of us heard, and I knew immediately that what it was. Of course, someone thought it was actually this member of our team who, where it happened most closely, was actually speaking, and he wasn't. I know what his voice sounds like. He was completely silent. So. These are the things that are continuing to happen, and we just wanted to give you a sample of the sort of tones and contact events that go along with this structured spacecraft and the objects that we're filming and the other kinds of experiences in consciousness because, again, it runs the gamut from thought and consciousness to fully materialized craft, to anomalous tones that are omnidimensional and omnidirectional, to lights that appear. Now, one of the things I do want to mention also, in Orange County, right around the time that we heard that voice right in front of us, there was a brilliant white light that burst into the center of the circle on one side of the circle, and then a few seconds later burst on the other side. And this was seen by dozens of people when this happened. So these are the kinds of things that happen in conjunction with this. And a lot of people say, well, why don't they just land like the mothership in Close Encounters of the Third Kind? And I said, well, this is something that, number one, we're not sure everyone's quite ready for that, but number two, there are military projects that track these spacecraft when they do appear, and that are increasingly targeting them and hitting them. And this is not a myth that there have been many dozens of extraterrestrial vehicles that have been shot down using advanced what are called scalar weapons. And scalar weapons go faster than the speed of light, and we have them in classified projects. So we always ask the ETs to appear in any way that is safe and appropriate for the time and place we're in and for the group that's there, and then we sort of like give it to them and let them choose how they're going to do this. And we're never disappointed, and it's always something new. I can say after 20 years of doing this, I kind of go from astonishment to astonishment as these things have unfolded. So, well, I think we're about out of time, and I'd like to thank you, Charlie, for doing all this work for us with the audio and the analysis, and there's certainly more that we have, but we're out of time, and I do appreciate your expertise, and all of us do, because it's something we really do need. And
it's a great pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank the people at the World Fusion Network for sponsoring us here every 2 weeks, and we're going to have these programs continuing with different people on our team to share these perspectives and experiences. And check the website at cseti.org, cseti.org, for the 2011 schedule of events that will be coming up. And I hope to see some of you at those. Until then, keep looking up. Hello and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. This is Dr. Greer, and I'm the founder of DisclosureProject.org and CSETI.org, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and also the OrionProject.org. And I'm very grateful to the people at the World Fusion Network for allowing us this time every 2 weeks to bring you an update about the work we're doing. And we'll be talking about some of the projects that are upcoming, as well as the work we're doing at Sirius.neverendinglight.com, which is the historic film that we're in the middle of production, and actually beginning to wrap up the production period right now on that film, and we'll be giving you an update on that. But the main focus of our show today is to bring you up to date with what's going on with the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, or CE5 Global Initiative, where we are organizing folks around the world to make contact within the framework of universal peace and cosmic awareness with extraterrestrial civilizations that are visiting our planet and are here to help us and to understand human culture and human society and us individually. And so I'm very excited about having Costa with me today, who's been really heading up and took the initiative himself to organize this group that now consists of dozens of groups around the world and hundreds of people who are going out and using the CE5 protocols to make contact. And for those of you who are new to the show, I just want to talk a little bit about what that entails. Back about 22 years ago, I formed the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which has as one of its projects the Disclosure Project, but its main and central project has always been the CE5 initiative, and that is when people go out to make contact with these extraterrestrial civilizations and these visitors within the framework of universal peace. And the foundation for that is universal awareness, universal consciousness. And so since we're on the World Fusion Network, I'll go right into the heart of it. The heart of it is that the mind itself is an omnipresent field that is connecting all people in all places and all times. And through the techniques that we've developed and through the innate capabilities every sentient being has, a person can go into deep consciousness and see a distant place in space or time and use coherent thought to make contact with these extraterrestrial civilizations that are using very advanced electromagnetic systems, sort of their own type of radio frequencies that interface with conscious thought that is in a coherent field. And this is something I discovered back in 1973 during a contact experience that I had up in the mountains of North Carolina as a 18-year-old boy, young man, and which I've subsequently developed into these contact protocols. The foundation of it is the understanding that the conscious mind, whereby all of us are awake, is always, whether we acknowledge it or not, omnipresent and unbounded. It's never limited to just the size and dimension of our physical body or space and time that we're in, and that the pure nature of a conscious mind is that it's always omnipresent. And so through meditation and becoming silent and centered in that mind, one can then awaken to remote places and see remote places in both space and time and contact these extraterrestrial civilizations by using a series of protocols that involve the thought being very coherently showing their location to you, but also you showing your location to them. So, for example, if there's an extraterrestrial vehicle out near Saturn, you would then show them where you are on Earth, you would show them the planet, you would show them, if you're in North America, and zoom right on into Virginia, where I am right now, so for example, using this kind of coherent thought imaging. And the reason this technique works and the reason people have such amazing experiences with it is because any civilization that can go faster than the speed of light, which a priori means all civilizations that are from another star system that are near the Earth, have developed technologies that are trans-dimensional and whose physics involve the science of consciousness and the science of mind. And this is not just a philosophical school, it is also a physical science that involves machinery, but very advanced machinery that are multiphasic resonant systems that cross faster than the speed of light into these other dimensions that involve visualized thought, the so-called astral sphere, coherent thought, and lucid dreaming. And so all of that is part of what we teach during these expeditions that I lead out under the stars. The next one is going to be out in Southern California in November. Unfortunately, that one's way oversubscribed and has a waiting list that we're having to move on to 2013. But what we do is that we basically train people to meditate in this fashion, go into the state of samadhi, and then begin to practice the skill of remote viewing or becoming a seer. And then once one has a sense of contact with these extraterrestrial beings or their spacecraft or their planet, to then flip that around and show them where you are. Now, we also use electromagnetic tones that we've recorded from ET craft and also from the crop circles that were recorded by the BBC that we project down into space from our location that gives a linear vector in case our minds aren't all that clear. And we also use high-powered lasers that go up 200 or 300 miles into space that go up to also give a linear sort of specific vector or point of reference in case, again, people aren't as clear in their imaging as they should be. So these protocols are all used in concert in a group dynamic out under the stars. And there are now 2 apps. There's an app that we've just developed for Android phones that you can use, and there's also an iPhone app that's been out for about a year so that you can utilize these protocols. It has the meditation techniques, it has the tones, it turns your phone into a magnetic field detector, so it can pick up on electromagnetic field changes as craft approach, et cetera, and so on. So actually anyone with a smartphone now can easily download this app and learn how to do this if you don't have time to come out with us out under the stars on one of these expeditions that we do periodically throughout the year. So if you want to find out more about that, there's a lot of information at cseti.org. And I encourage people to practice this with people that they're in consonant sort of harmony with, and who they feel connected with to go out under the stars and make this sort of connection. I think it's really important that the philosophical and ethical underpinning of what we're doing is that we don't pick and choose amongst extraterrestrial civilizations, that we regard all intelligent life as centrally emanating from the great sun of reality, of the great being, and we are going forward as ambassadors in universal peace and in cosmic awareness in our outreach to them. And so the philosophy of this is that we are sending ourselves forward as ambassadors to the universe and approach this in a diplomatic and ambassadorial way, as opposed to the normal human way of sort of dividing different groups into camps of the good and the bad and the indifferent. Our view is very much that we need to be in touch with all extraterrestrial civilizations, because we're going through a fundamental shift in not just the Earth but the entire cosmos, where we're going to go from a time of division and discord into a time of universal harmony, and the hallmark of that is universal peace. And so we have to have people who are doing this and understanding that it's key that we be ambassadors to all civilizations that are near the Earth or aware of the Earth or are coming to the Earth. Of course, the Disclosure Project has proven that we are being visited, and the big question then becomes, then what are you going to do about it? Because we know that the President and the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and the UN Secretary General are not heading up an ambassador team to do this, and therefore, as citizens of Earth, we feel that it's important that we, the people, take on this task and create the morphogenic field, as Sheldrake would describe it, this sort of 100th monkey effect by a lot of us doing it together and creating this big shift in human awareness towards the cosmos and towards universal peace. So we're going to have to go from the current state of the world to world peace and universal peace all in one step. And that is what the big change that is coming and that we're in the midst of is partially about. And the root of it, however, is in this big shift in cosmic awareness, the understanding of what is the basis of oneness and unity. And it isn't, if humans view themselves as so diverse they can't get along, how much more so the kind of diversity in the cosmos. So it has to find a deeper spiritual basis for peace and a deeper spiritual basis for oneness, and that's really at the core of what we're practicing. And that's the core of the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative. And what's really important about the work that Costa's been doing with folks is to coordinate teams from all over the world to go out often on the same evening or series of evenings and do this together. So what the effect of that is enormous, in the sense that you have, instead of one small group here and there doing it, a whole lot of people doing it at the same time, which then potentiates this change and potentiates the coming of a new era of universal peace. So thank you, Costa, for doing this, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on the show, Steve. I do want to thank you for the inspiration and the background that you've provided for 22 years, because the work that we are doing with our Global CE5 initiatives that you've mentioned grows directly out of the groundwork that you have laid for these 22 years by teaching people, educating them about the protocols, and making it possible for ordinary people to make contact themselves. This is really a very empowering type of thing. I like to tell many of the people that join our group that we don't need millions of dollars and expensive computers and antennas to make contact. We need our lawn chairs, our good spirit, our goodwill, our love, our intention to be peaceful ambassadors and to join with other humans. And the next thing you know is that the ETs are responding to that. They're overjoyed at that. So we took our cue from that groundwork that you put down, and since October of 2010, our groups have been going out every month, as you said, often on the same night or the same couple of nights to accommodate people's schedules, and coordinated our contact. And this has been something that has resulted in approximately 70 teams that I have all over the world now, spread across almost 20 countries and half of the United States who do this on a monthly basis. And it's been very consistent in its application and also in its results. People will send me reports every month of the ET contact experience that they have had, and I compile these reports and then send them out to the entire group. And let me tell you, this really inspires the group members because they share it, and though many of them have never met, what this does is glues everyone together even better and makes a more coherent worldwide group, knowing that this camaraderie of spiritual contact with ET civilizations is what binds everybody. So we have a beautiful ongoing experience, and we're looking to obviously grow these many groups. You had mentioned the fact that governments are doing this, so really it is up to us, we the people, to undertake this initiative and to grow it as big as we can. And so in that spirit, I invite people who are new to this and willing to try and experiment and are open-minded to join us monthly. Come to etletstalk.org, where people can sign up and learn more. That's etletstalk.org, and we will be happy to welcome you to the Global CE5 community and get you started on forming your own team or doing it by yourself and joining the rest of us in doing this coordinated, regular kind of contact.
Right, and on the disclosureproject.org site, there is an entire training kit that people can get if they can't come on one of these training expeditions. And if you're near an existing group, you can, of course, join those folks, or you can use the iPhone app or the Android app for smartphones, because it has a huge amount of material. People are shocked when they see how much information and how much meditation information and training material there is on that app. It's an entire encyclopedia and training kit that you can get online for any smartphone now. So those tools are there, and I think it's very exciting that you're coordinating this, because I'm obviously way overextended, frankly, and because we don't have a central office that's staffed with a lot of people, it's just whatever volunteers can do. And God bless him, Costa stepped forward and said, look, I'll head this up, this will be fun, and he's been at it now for a couple of years, so thank you, Costa, for doing that.
It's my pleasure. This work is its own inspiration. Once you get a lot of these reports coming in from people and hearing they thought that they were alone and were the only ones who had wished to be able to do this, but then finding a community where they don't feel like they're strange or weird, once you hear them express that gratitude and then just join right in with everybody to do the contact, then you really realize what hunger is out there and how the power of many is just greater than the power of just one. So that is really its own reward.
Well, this has, of course, been borne out by scientific studies by Dr. Bob John and Dr. Radin and others who have proven that with, like, for example, random number generators, when you have one person who's putting their intent on a random number generator, just thinking to it, it will have an effect. And it proves that mind and consciousness is non-local and has an effect even on mechanical, machines. However, when there are 2 people or 5 people who are unified doing it, the effect is exponentially greater. It's not just arithmetic. So I always point out to people that when there are hundreds of people or thousands of people doing this, it has this huge effect that's in the field of consciousness of humanity and the cosmos, and actually manifests a different future than the future that a lot of the war profiteers and others would like to drag us onto, which is, of course, the future of what Douglas MacArthur said in the 1950s when he stood in front of the Congress during his last speech and said World War III will be interplanetary. There's this sort of atavistic, very craven predilection for the power elite to keep the people of the world united through some kind of conflict. And we know from the testimony at the Disclosure Project from Werner von Braun and others, many others, that for years now, for about 60 years, it's been planned to launch a interplanetary war where they would hoax a threat from outer space, and that the only thing that's going to change that dynamic is for lots of people, first of all, to have the discernment to know the truth from the fiction, but number two, to actually take matters into our own hands, because the governments of the world are usually simply pawns at the hands of the gangbangsters and the war profiteers and the multi-trillion-dollar, as Eisenhower warned, military-industrial complex to keep that other paradigm in the forefront. And we understand this. I mean, if you look at Hollywood over the last 2-3 years, there's been something like $2.3 or $4 billion spent on very xenophobic, negative, alien movies and video games and shows of all stripes, and that this is all part of a plan to basically brainwash the masses into this concept that we should be afraid of what's out there, so that eventually we will accept the costs of exporting war into space, sort of a very large ramp-up of the Star Wars-type nonsense that started during the Reagan years. And I think that what the public has to understand is that the only thing that's really going to change that is knowledge, disclosure, and people actually going out and making contact peacefully. And I always point out that, having been doing this both as a private individual since I was 18, which I'm no spring chicken, so that's now almost 40 years, 39 years I've been doing this. But on top of that, to have been doing it with organized people all over the world, on every continent, and we have had nothing but the most beautiful and positive experiences having contact with these civilizations, their people, their spacecraft, and all manner of way, whether it's electromagnetic, physically, however way it is. The only time we've had any trouble at all is when we've had humans who, shot at us or chased us or robbed us at gunpoint in Mexico or whatever. But we've never had any problems from ETs. It's always been Homo sapiens, humans, that have been the problem. So one of the things I point out to people with all the armchair scaremongering, that the fact is that with all the thousands of people who have done this and are doing it, our experiences have been just very beautiful and wonderful experiences. And there's really nothing to be afraid of except the brainwashing that people are subject to. And I said, this is the whole thing where, you sort of, like the old In Vogue song, Free Your Mind. You got to free your mind of the sort of propaganda that's out there in the UFO and New Age community, and also that's out there in the mainstream media as well, and Hollywood, and sort of cut through all that nonsense and say, okay, if these civilizations are here, which clearly there's amazing evidence they are, what are they here for? There's some people say, oh, well, they're here because they have to have our genetic material. Well, no, because now we know that we can create genetic material in a test tube. So if we can, interstellar civilizations 1 million years more advanced than we are can. Well, they're here to get our gold or silver or natural resources. Well, it turns out there are whole planets and asteroids out there made of pure diamonds or gold or what have you. So you don't need to do that. So no, they're here for whatever excuse people come up with, that sort of this paranoid reason why they're here doesn't hold water. The truth is they're here because they know we've reached the point where we have weapons of mass destruction and are now going into space and could be an existential threat to other planets out there. And they want us to do two things: see that we don't destroy ourselves or others, but also to reach out to those of us on this planet who are ready to create a bridge between the human civilization that we have here to these visitors who are here, and then move our civilization on a path that is peace on earth and peace in the heavens, peace that is universal. And that's really why they're here. They're interested in seeing if that can happen and reaching out. And that's why, when Costa, when you said that, virtually, and I have gotten a report recently from someone who just learned of this, and they went out to a remote area of Utah with a friend, just the two of them, and they were practicing the protocols from the app that they had on their iPhone. And suddenly, within minutes, this craft appeared right over them. And it was this brilliant craft, and it was this beautiful celestial light. And he was so amazed, and so was his friend, that this would happen that easily. I said, no, it's not amazing, because it is on one hand. On the other hand, it makes sense, because you got 7 billion people on this planet, and you have all these wars that are still going on, and all this money and expenditure going into basically a corrupt macroeconomic order that's destroying the biosphere and other animals in the oceans, and all the military spending and all the thermonuclear weapons, and more countries trying to get atomic bombs, and on and on. And how many people are out there who, A, know this is true, that we're being visited, and B, are doing anything constructive, positive, forward-looking, progressive, peaceful? And so when someone emerges out of this morass of the human condition of right now in 2012, who's willing with a pure heart to do this, they're often astonished at how quickly the ETs respond, and in all the mysterious ways that they do. And the reason for it is that they really are eager to have people who will approach them, but not, like, do a trick for me because you're a dolphin at SeaWorld, but out of a sincere desire to connect and a sincere desire to come together as one people. And the basis for that oneness is the experience of the universality of pure consciousness, which an ET from another galaxy possesses as well as we do. That even if their intellect and emotion and bodies may be different, the conscious mind within all of us is a singularity. It is one conscious being, and this is what all Vedic masters taught and know, and what all people who, of course, listen to the World Puja Network know. And so when you begin to contemplate that, then you begin to understand why it is that the contact happens so easily once you not only understand that, but begin to practice these meditation techniques and protocols that are rooted in the Vedic science of consciousness.
I want to underscore what you were saying, Steve, that amid this morass of warlike behavior, the sense of appreciation for peaceful human beings is really great among the ETs towards us, because I have hundreds of reports over just the last 2 years from my teams that attest to the peaceful, benevolent, positive type of contact that they've been getting. And again, as you said, whenever there is a negative experience, and guess what? It's because a military jet or two has flown over and disrupted what was a beautiful contact experience in the sky or on the ground, or a helicopter's flown overhead that was clearly meant to be disruptive. So yes, it is the humans who really are the troublemakers. And,
right.
And
it's like, look in the mirror if you want to know what you should be concerned about, but it isn't out there in space, because there is a universal order, and if a civilization hasn't attained a certain level of peacefulness, they're simply not allowed out of their solar system, and usually not very far from their home planet. And that is a prime directive that is enforced. And this is one of the reasons, by the way, some of the folks I know at the CIA and the Pentagon have told me they've been very irritated when we've used some of these anti-gravity things we've been building for 60 years at Lockheed and Northrop Grumman, my uncle's old company, and some other places. And we try to go too far out in our own solar system. And basically we're told, that's it, no further, stop. and we have been stopped. And the reason for it is that they really don't want. In fact, Neil Armstrong, who passed away a couple months ago, who landed on the moon, and my uncle designed the lunar module. What's fascinating about that event is that when we landed, the crater on the rim above where we landed, it was crowded, I'm quoting, with extraterrestrial vehicles and these disc-shaped craft and other craft that were just hovering there watching. And, of course, this was filmed, and it was all kept secret. And I know that these astronauts were ordered to maintain secrecy, but I know very close family members of Buzz Aldrin and also Neil Armstrong who have told me absolutely that happened, but they're not allowed to talk about it. But one of the things, the messages that was sent was, because the Apollo program, the moon program, was part of the Cold War competition with the Soviet Union, a fact that is often forgotten by many Americans, it was not viewed as a terribly great thing because we weren't doing it as a people, humans. We were doing it as a competing nation state as part of our military competitiveness with the old Soviet Union at the time. And that's just a fact if you look at the history of the 50s and 60s and the space program. So the ETs even then were more looking for us to reach a point that we really should have reached, probably in the late 1800s or early 1900s when mass communications became possible, to begin to say, look, we're all people. We need to live together peacefully and in cooperation rather than in a paradigm of endless domination and submission and war and madness. And that's the leap we haven't made in the last 100 years that we need to make. And that's the sort of entry ticket to being an interplanetary civilization. And many times people say, oh, why don't they just come and, I remember Larry King asking me, why don't they just land on the White House lawn or what? I'm going, well, aside from being blown out of the sky by electromagnetic weapons and other missiles, you're presupposing they would want to land on our White House and not the White House in Bogota, Colombia, or some other country, and number one. And number two, they're waiting for humans to reach a certain level of evolution before that happens, because they're wanting us to interface with them in a paradigm of not just world peace, but universal peace. World peace isn't big enough. That concept is an old concept. Now we have to think of world peace evolving simultaneously with universal peace, because otherwise we're going to unite the world, as Reagan said at the UN, against an alien threat. Well, we don't want to unite the world against an alien threat. So in other words, we're going to trade fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan with the whole world being united but trying to fight other planetary systems. Well, this is not going forward, my friends. This is going way back and very dangerous thinking and very retrograde thinking. But unfortunately, the UFO subculture in Hollywood and TV is just, filled with these kind of images and concepts, and it just should be, relegated to the dust heap of history. But certainly we're the minority voice on this. But it's the voice of, I think, reason and the voice of wisdom. And we need to have more people join with us to engage in this CE5 initiative globally, because it is through the effect of mind in its non-local field that you begin to have an effect that you can't even see. The whole concept, there's a sort of 100th monkey effect where, once a certain number of people begin to do something, other people are affected by it, even if they have no direct linear contact with the people who are doing it. And this has been proven scientifically. So the more that we do this, and do these meditations for universal peace and the healing of the world and all of this, and make contact, we're creating the energy patterns and in deep consciousness that is having an effect beyond what we can even see and know about. And that's the beauty of the nature of the mind within us, is that it really is all the time an omnipresent field of awareness, and it has this effect. And this is why meditation is so powerful, and also praying for others at distances can have a huge effect and a healing effect and what have you. And it's because we've been able to prove scientifically that consciousness itself and mind itself is an omnipresent field, and it is integrated into every point in space and time, and it's there not in a part but in its fullness. And that's what blows people's minds when they begin to contemplate the fact that every single individual, whether it's human or ET, is actually a quantum hologram that is a conscious universal form and is plugged into that universality and has an effect that is universal, not just local. And I think this is where you begin to realize the power of a lot of people coming together to do something wonderful. And that's what we're working on, and that's why it's so important, the work that Host is kind of heading up with this.
when I step back every month as I communicate with people and learn who's going to be joining that month for the contact event, it's amazing that really all I have is about 200 or 300 people right now that are participating in this. Now, that's not a lot of people out of the 7 billion on the planet. Probably a decimal point with a bunch of zeros and then a 1, right? But the power of the coherence, you talk about how it becomes more exponential. I know that those 200 or 300 people, because of our coordinated, cohesive, aligned approach, coherent thought sequencing, we're having an effect that's way out of proportion to our numbers, and that's why the ETs are overjoyed, and they tell us that through various means to discover that there's even a handful of us that are doing this. Now, well,
and then for every person doing that, there are thousands of people who have gotten these apps who are doing it, like this man who just told me about his experience with just one friend. Wasn't coordinated with what you were doing, but they're still doing it. So there are these thousands of people doing it all the time at various times around the world. And since time really doesn't exist, it's still happening. You see what I'm saying? It's on a level of the beat conscious structure and the Akashic record. That work is still going on. It's still happening, even if it's not specifically on that night and at that moment and snapshot in time, as the flow of change is what time is. So that's a really interesting thing to understand, too, is that there are thousands of people on top of the ones that do these on these coordinated bases. And that's why I encourage people to do it in any way they can and whenever they can.
Exactly.
Because it's an additive effect that isn't arithmetic. It's exponential, the effect it has. And that's what's really exciting. Kosa, do you have any reports you want to share from any of these groups, just to give people a sense of the kinds of experiences and things that people have had happen? I think people always like hearing what experiences folks have had.
Everybody does enjoy hearing what someone else has experienced, because the contact is so diverse that whatever contact you may have had is not like someone else's, and so it's like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was possible. People love it. Recently, one of our groups in New York had 27 people joining for one of the CE5 evenings, and they had an amazing encounter, literally on their property, which was, I believe, is somewhat rural, and they were out there together as a group meditating, doing the protocols. From behind a nearby tree, they saw an object rising, like a light, a golden light. And after determining that it was, not a terrestrial aircraft or a satellite or whatever, it was far closer than that, it rose above the tree, and to everyone's amazement, very slowly, at what they estimate is about 1,000, maybe 1,200 feet of elevation, this golden craft light floated over the property, over the center of the circle where everyone had gathered, and it was close enough that members could look up and actually see a triangular shape amid this glowing light. It apparently moved people to tears. They were just awed by this, and it went over the group and then went on and disappeared. Some people managed, in their surprise, to get some pictures. I don't know about the quality of the pictures because I haven't seen them all. Sometimes people are prepared with good quality cameras. Sometimes in the moment, all one can do is pull out your iPhone and take a picture, right? But this was a very up-close, personal, and I would say spiritual experience for those involved, and maybe even life-changing, to be able to have that kind of a close encounter where you can see the outlines of the craft. And that's the kind of thing where nobody can debunk that. It is an experience that those people have had very personally, and it's something they take with them the rest of their lives, and they tell other people, and it has the ring of authenticity and truth, and allows other people then to open up and consider the possibility that they can have the same kind of experience. So that's how our network is growing, through experiences like that, the ripple effect of one person telling another with the ring of truth draws another person in. So I wanted to give a shout-out to that group and say thank you all for for doing this. Oh, and by the way, as is pretty classic with many of our experiences, once this happened for the group, 2 military jets flew over, and subsequent activity that they had seen seemed to stop. So, again, this is a classic kind of thing where a disruptive effect by humans is introduced because they don't like the fact that the rest of us are having a great time with our star cousins.
Right.
So,
right.
But that comes with the territory. Many of us have gotten used to that, and it still allows for these powerful experiences to happen. And
it almost sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, and I know that when Arm Kalika was with us in June, a few months ago, we were in Colorado in the San Luis Valley, and we had this brilliant craft that materialized coming in from the west behind us, and very low, and it floated over us, this brilliant lit kind of disc-shaped object, which we did film. And instantly there were a series of jets that had taken up position in the northern part of the valley out near up towards where Colorado Springs is, and NORAD, North American Air Defense Command, has been located. And one of those jets peeled away with afterburner and arced and came right over towards this object, and this object literally dematerialized in a crystal clear sky. And as it did so, it sort of made a ring. It sort of made a swoosh that we actually have on a still camera that Emery Smith took, where this object just literally vanishes in thin air and, ramps over into another dimension and goes into another dimension from linear space-time. And all this is on video. And, of course, we were seeing this happen. And, of course, I knew this would happen because it invariably does. But the filmmaker and his crew and the people who were there going, oh, my God, I can't believe that happened. As I said, well, this happened several times a night. Every night we're out. And it was the first night that he was out. And I said, this is just kind of de rigueur, and I'll never forget being at Rio Rico down in Arizona, and we were doing this thing with a whole group of 200 or 300 folks. And one day at lunch, I'm sitting out on the terrace on the balcony of this restaurant at this resort there in southern Arizona, way south of Tucson, and we're not that far from Fort Huachuca, which is Army Intelligence Headquarters, where they have a lot of underground facilities where there have been ET craft that have been shot, and the bodies of the ETs have been autopsied and stored. And I know of people who have worked in that facility, and we're having this big gathering. It's broad daylight in the middle of the day, and I'm having lunch with Colin Andrews and Dr. Loader and several other people, Dr. Bravo, and other people who are at our table, and this unmarked helicopter comes in at 50 feet, hovering off of this thing. The door opens, and there's this electromagnetic boom and beam that comes out with the devices and imaging stuff. And this is a helicopter absolutely in violation of all FAA requirements in terms of altitude and distance from a private resort, and gathering like this in broad daylight, a few feet from us. And Colin Andrews, who's, of course, famed for his work in crop circles and coin door, he says, oh, my God, he says, I can't believe it. I just said, well, welcome to my world. And he says, well, I don't know if I want to live in that world. I said, well, you are this weekend. Anyway, so it was hilarious, and we did get really great photographs of this unmarked military chopper doing this. And I tell people this happens as sort of what you would expect at this point, where, the biggest secret in the history of the human race, they're trying to keep a lid on it. And here we are out there with thousands of people now trained, making contact. And you know what? They're losing control. And so they can get a little desperate and do silly things like that, but it doesn't stop us at all, and it doesn't stop the ETs at all. We just always ask the ETs to manifest in whatever way it is safe and appropriate for them. Don't take any undue risks. But, we see them as sort of the leading partner in this dance, since they have better reconnaissance capabilities than certainly I have. And but invariably, they'll appear like this New York event that you talked about that just happened, and then there'll be some military craft come in, and basically the activity that comes in at that point is trying to suppress any further linear space-time materialization. But here's the zinger. we have found that even if that happens on a trans-dimensional level, in another dimension parallel to linear space-time, within the near etheric, near astral field, the ETs will be there in the field with us, and we'll actually see them shimmering, and our electronic devices will be going off, and our radar detectors and laser detectors and magnetic field meters, and we'll get photographs of these images of beings moving around us, and sometimes even entire craft, but with the naked eye you don't see them, and yet they're there. And they're shifted into another dimension that you can just get a sense of, and they're then beyond the range of these military assets, which I think aggravates them even more. But nevertheless, it means that the contact continues even after there has been a disruptive event like that. And so one of the things I train people is to be sort of as aloof as a cloud as these things are happening, to not be concerned, don't be afraid, just stay in that state of deep, calm, pure consciousness. A little of this eliminates all fear, so said Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield. And so you just stay in that state and know that these civilizations that can go from one star system to another out of linear space-time can be right there in the field or under the earth or in the sky around you and be out of linear space-time and out of harm's way, but still be there. And you can see them in your inner sight. You can feel them with your electromagnetic skin, your senses. You can sometimes smell them. You can sometimes hear tones. And your electronics often will be signaling that they're around. Even though you're out in the middle of a wilderness, you'll have these electronics beginning to beep and chirp and talk as if it's a person. And you're going, what are they doing? Well, they're going inside the electronics of these devices that we recommend that people have out there with them. So all kinds of things like this happen, and it's a never-ending and exciting journey. And what the ETs have said to us over the last couple of decades is that we're always going to be with you, and we can be with you no matter what these silly things, the games, the war games that these guys may want to play. And at some point, that nonsense will stop, and there will be just complete and open contact, and that's what we're working towards. But of course, obviously, the world has some explaining to do until then and some evolving to do until then. But we're well on our way, and I think this film that we're working on is going to make a big quantum leap forward in that.
We're very excited about the film series, and I know from talking to many of our team members that people are anxiously and excitedly looking forward to being able to help it go viral, distribute it on the internet.
Oh, absolutely.
Just in the way that our crowd came together to be able to fund it and get it to the point where it could be in pre-production and now production and then post-production. And we will finally see the wonderful, groundbreaking results that it brings. So
well, and this is what we're working on right now. We're doing the final production elements, and as you may have heard from the last interview, we were able to obtain DNA samples from this possible deceased extraterrestrial being, and I do have news about that, just to update people in the next few minutes. We have and right now I'm just not going to give names out, but we have a team of medical doctors and PhD geneticists who are at the top institutions in the world doing this work with us. Of course, Dr. Bravo and I and Emery Smith went over to a very distant foreign country and obtained CAT scans and X-rays and physical DNA samples from this small about 6-inch long a body that is mostly skeleton and some connective tissue, but we were able to get some DNA material. What is astonishing is that the CAT scan of it is an oh my God event when you see it. It puts to lie any question that it's an actual organic, non-hoaxed physical body, number one, because you see the internal organs, et cetera, and so on. Number two, it is not some hominid, because it's not old enough to be a fossil like Lucy or some ancient, from the period before Homo sapiens. It's just not that old. I mean, it's dried out, but it's not a fossil, and it's certainly not that old. The third point is that it has features which are like a human in terms of a head and two arms and two legs and a thoracic cavity and an abdominal cavity. But that's kind of where the similarities end. And there's so many other anomalies. Now, a medical doctor who literally wrote the textbook at an Ivy League school on skeletal genetic and fetal dysplasias, as they're called, and abnormalities, has looked at this now and has said this is nothing he has ever seen, and also that he and the radiologist, who was the chief of radiology at the institute where we had all these imaging studies done, have stated that the amount of bone density precludes it being a 20 to 22-week aborted fetus, which is what the size it would be if it were human, which it doesn't look human anyway, and that it was something that apparently was perhaps a year or more old because of the degree of the bone density, although there are further studies being done on that. So we've gotten an enormous amount of data in the last 3 weeks that we didn't have prior, and we're going to get more with the genetic studies, which will probably take a couple months, and how much of that will be able to appear in this film depends on how quickly they can be done. We're not going to rush it because we want to do it right. But, of course, we do have a deadline on the film of sometime in December. So we're just going to have to see how all that comes together. But it is being worked on very, very vigorously. And I can tell you it is the best team in the world in terms of credentials. So this is the sort of one thing that we're working on. Of course, there's a lot of other information that will be in the film because the film really wants to encompass contact and transdimensional sciences, new energy, and the disclosure material. And, of course, that's a lot to do in 2 hours. I mean, so it'll really just be a taste of all of that. But we're also working to see if we can develop a website where this film becomes a portal, and then the film will refer to, let's say we have only a few of these military witnesses in there, but on the website there could be, several dozen of them with their entire testimony on the website that you could use the film then as a portal. Same thing with government documents. Same things with the information on this possible small ET body, because you could do an entire movie about this journey that we've been on. Same thing with the contact events that CSETI has had, where we've had hundreds and in fact thousands of encounters and photographs and visits and pictures of ET beings and craft and what have you. So any one of these things could be an entire series, and never mind 1 2-hour film. So we want to develop a sort of a multimedia approach to this, and that's another thing we're going to be working on the next few months. And we're going to need all the help we can with that. We're actually in the process of searching for a very top-drawer web architect firm that's big enough and professional enough to achieve that in the next 2 to 3 months, which is a very tall order. But at any rate, that's the kind of thing we're working on, and the team at Never Ending Light, Arm Kalik and his team, are working to try to get all these images and interviews processed and organized into a coherent movie. And we hope that we can have the premiere sometime early next year. So that's still the kind of timeline we're looking at, all things being equal. The actually making of the film is outside my control, of course. I'm not a filmmaker, but the kinds of materials that we provided are such that it's going to be amazing.
That's right, and I just want everyone to know that our community will certainly be behind this because, as you mentioned, Dr. Greer, the film encompasses so many different interwoven themes that any one of which could be a deep dive into its own series.
Oh, yeah.
I think that the film will open a lot of minds. It will astonish a lot of people, and they're going to want to follow up and maybe have contacts of their own. This will be an incredible educational effort to empower average individuals to see that they can join in and become part of this people-powered movement of disclosure and ET contact. So the potential there is just great.
Yeah, well, I think that it'll potentiate that, and it'll potentiate more people to come forward who are whistleblowers, who have secrets, who've been in the government, and it will also potentiate the means, we hope, of generating the funding from people by streaming the video or doing video on demand or whatever, so that we end up having enough resources to develop a new energy lab and put some of the brilliant scientists that have come forward in one place in a lab working to bring out these technologies so we can get off of oil and gas and coal. Because the big secret of the secret is that they don't care too much about the fact that the people think that there's intelligent life out there. The studies have shown 2/3 of the public believe there's intelligent life out in the universe. The problem is to say they're here, and then how did they get here, and then what's the physics behind how they got here. And when you open up that question, then it's goodbye ExxonMobil and Halliburton, and goodbye Goldman Sachs, and goodbye centralized macroeconomic order, and the petrodollar is for Schimmel, and it's gone. And one thing after another, the whole house of cards is basically replaced by an entirely new macroeconomic order of self-sufficiency, sustainability. Each village and town and community would be self-sufficient. And the sort of, the 200 or 300 folks who now have more than half the net worth of the world, that would power, literally and figuratively, would be shared. Right now it isn't. We just pretend we live in a democracy, but we don't. And so I think that that's the reason for the secrecy, that most people just simply have never understood around the whole UFO issue. And it has to do with the macroeconomic and order of the world, which is understandable. It's the oldest story in the world of cartels wanting to get more and more power. But in reality, what it's doing at this stage is strangling the life out of the Earth and killing the biosphere, and leading to one conflict after another in the Mideast and elsewhere, and to enormous poverty. Most Americans don't understand that there's a statistic that I always share, that 48% of the world's population do not have a pot to pee in, literally do not have a toilet or running water. So 48% of the world does not have indoor plumbing. So this is kind of hard for most Americans to wrap their mind around, because we tend to be so kind of self-satisfied and narcissistic in our society. But if we're going to be compassionate about our fellow humans, we have to realize that it's a dire situation globally, not just environmentally, but in terms of poverty and geopolitics. And this isn't going to be solved by punching another hole in the ground to get oil and gas out of it. So that's why, this information that will be in this film, Sirius, and people who are just hearing about this, you can see what we're doing at Sirius.neverendinglight.com, is so important, because it's going to connect all these dots together so people understand that we're not alone, we can make contact, but also hear the sciences of the future, the technologies of new energy, of anti-gravity, of energy from zero-point field and the quantum vacuum, and the ability for the world to make a real change from the course it's on to a course that can go on for thousands of years of abundance and peace and sustainability. And that's really what our objective is. And so the film is going to make that really clear to people. And it certainly will, in 2 hours, can only introduce all these concepts, but I think with some really skill in the art of filmmaking, which we have on this team, then we can do that. And hopefully there can then be sequels. There can be follow-up ones that go deeper and deeper and deeper into various parts of this. So we're starting with this one, and thanks to all of you who've provided the funding for this. This has not been funded by a corporation or a big movie house. It's been funded by all of you, and I just want to thank all of you for your tremendous support that have given us the opportunity to work together to bring this out.
It's been a wonderful journey, and I think people are still there, and they're going to take it to the next level once the film comes out. Indeed.
Well, tell people again, Acosta, how they can get hold of you and be part of these coordinated CE5 journeys. Give them the website and your information again.
Sure. You can surf to etletstalk.org. That's ETLETSTALK.org. We'd love to sign you up, and I'll send you some information and welcome you to the community. And as Dr. Greer was saying, the apps that he has produced are wonderful tools that can get you out in the field for next to nothing and get you started. So I encourage people to look those up and just go out and do it. You'll be surprised at the results, and we'd love to welcome you into the community.
Right, and for those of you who want to, you can sign up for free for our newsletters and our mailing list and information on everything we're doing at either cfeti.org or at disclosureproject.org, and you'll get an update every week or two about what we're doing and where we're having these gatherings out under the stars and the update on the film and other information. So you can sign up and get that information for free for anyone who just wants to click it on and put your email address in there, and we'll stay in touch with all of you. So we're about out of time. I'd like to thank you, Costa, for your input and your support and all the hard work you're doing.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Steve.
And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network because they've been so wonderful giving us this opportunity to update people and to share our perspective and information on this really fascinating and world-changing subject. And until next time, keep looking up and stay in touch. Hope to see you all.